Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Today, something a little different. I was invited to have a conversation at the Rhode Island State House with a couple of really interesting people, one of whom is Rabia Chaudry, who is an attorney, author, and podcast host, and really well known for her work on the Adnan Syed case. You may remember this from the podcast Serial, as well as Rabia's podcast Undisclosed and her New York Times best-selling book, Adnan's Story, The Search for Truth and Justice After Serial. So this conversation also features Robin Kall, who is a book influencer from Reading with Robin. And again, sort of an impromptu, hey, Robbie is going to be in town to give a speech. She gave a speech earlier this week at the Aurora Club in Providence. So this invite came out, and again, we just met up at the Rhode Island State House, and you'll hear we're kind of bouncing around a lot of different topics, and just a great opportunity to sit down with somebody who has done the work. And you'll even hear as Rabia introduces herself, she doesn't describe herself initially as a podcaster or a broadcaster or anything like that. It really is about the work that took place on the show that is defining her identity, and I would even say perhaps her mission. And I just think that's a really fascinating thing, is that we're in an era where there's so much content out there, and you can peel the onion back a little bit and start to ask yourself, well, what is the content for? Is it serving just to build name recognition of the person who's behind that content, brand building, or are you actually doing work? So that, I guess, would be sort of the main takeaway from this conversation that we had. I would highly recommend anybody who hasn't checked out Rabia's work, be it through Serial or subsequently with Undisclosed and the books, highly recommend you do so. This is a major character in a lot of really important work that has taken place on innocence and in an exploding area of true crime, right? The innocence aspect of things is perhaps arguably the most important aspect of all of that work. Of course, justice in general matters, but there's something about the work of, be it institutes or individuals, proving innocence, those who have been wrongfully convicted, helping to overturn that just stands out as such a colossally important aspect of the type of work that you can do as an individual out there, no matter what your background is. Now, of course, with Rabia being an attorney, it certainly advances the cause significantly, and having built a brand, so to speak, through her work, it also allows for a great platform for that megaphone to be heard in a wider and perhaps more entrenched realm. But I don't know. I just thought this conversation was pretty relaxed, and we touch on women's history, particularly because we recorded this on International Women's Day. A lot of interesting stuff in here. Check it out.
My name is Rabia Chaudry. I'm an attorney and advocate.
My name's Robin Kall. I am a book influencer, reader, and book pusher too.
Beautiful. So here we are at the Rhode Island State House, and there's specific reasons why we're here today having this conversation, but then there's a big picture sort of question that or topic, I guess, that we could get into, which is, I think, the power of doing something. And we were kind of talking offline about not just protest, peaceful or otherwise, but actually taking action, be it as an attorney, be it as a voice in a broadcast or podcast context, just within your community. So let's start with that theme. You've done something pretty spectacular and continue to do so. I've talked about it in the intro. Tell us about your world and what it's like now to kind of build on the momentum you've already established with such important work.
You know, I mean, you might have noticed that I introduced myself as an attorney and advocate, not necessarily as a podcaster and author. And the reason for that is because, you know, I have been doing advocacy since 9/11 on behalf of the American Muslim community. And a lot of us who were young at the time, right out of college, I mean, like, we just became, you know, without wanting to, advocates. And for me, you know, whether it's the podcasting, whether it's the book I wrote about Adnan, whether it's a lot of the work, these are all tools of my advocacy, frankly. You know, it's hard for me to still consider myself, like, I don't introduce myself as a podcaster because I use my podcast as a means to an end for the most part. And for me, like, I went to law school thinking I want to be a filthy rich corporate lawyer. And then 9/11 happened, and there were all these things happening around us that just required so much attention and people and resources, and I couldn't look away. And when you start doing, like, the kind of work that has, like, direct impact on people's lives, you kind of end up doing it in one way or the other, I feel like, for the rest of your life. And that's where I'm still at. And for me, like, for 7 years now, I've been focused on innocence work. And it's not like, this is not volume work. You can't do like 35 cases a year. You do like 2, you know, and you stick with those cases for a very long time. But they all have such a profound impact on a family, on a defendant, and it's worth the time and effort.
Do I answer that question as well?
You want me to follow that?
Yeah. Good luck.
Rabia and I met through books, which is how I meet a lot of incredible people, and it's that connection. I mean, we met through your memoir, and when you read somebody's memoir, you're reading their heart. And I also had the pleasure of having breakfast with Rabia, so we were just old friends by the time I was on page 3. Because it's, you know, when you connect with somebody on a certain level, you just get them in so many ways, and that's kind of what I do with books, you know, putting them into hands of people who are asking what to read or what is meaningful to them or what they're looking for at the time. And so that's how Rabia and I met, but I can't follow that. I advocate for reading, though, and meaningful books, and also, you know, pleasure, which is incredibly meaningful. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's start with that conversation on 9/11, which was, you know, I'm a millennial, and, you know, it feels like, okay, you've got 9/11, the financial collapse in 2008, and then the pandemic, all of this with a number of other pushing the boulder up the hill type of experiences for everybody, but especially my generation. But one thing that came out of 9/11, besides, of course, the security and all that business, is a worldview shift that was in some ways horrific and in some ways also shined a light on the U.S.'s role in West Asia, in the Middle East, the relationship between the global north and, frankly, anybody who is brown, black.
Sure.
It shined a light on that. It's not that this started at 9/12.
Right.
At this, what have you learned from that experience? What's your biggest message in terms of, hey, take a look at the reality of our world and package it for people to understand?
Gosh, I mean, like, that's a really big question because it's been a long time since 9/11, and I've learned a lot of lessons. But one of the most important things I've learned that I try to convey to especially young people is that change is possible. It is true. There was you know, I grew up in small town America. My dad worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We grew up like where there were chicken farms everywhere, right? We were always like kind of the odd ducks, but we were just the local brown friendlies. Nobody was, you know, aggressive to us or rude to us. They were just a little curious. And I never really felt out of place, like, in the country. 9/11 is when I started questioning whether or not, like, can I raise my children here? Do I belong here? Do I go back home where I was born in Pakistan? What do we do? And it was really disheartening as somebody who really, and, you know, my parents really believed in the American dream, and my father passed recently, and he passed away believing in the American dream. I asked him 6 months before he died, do you ever regret moving here and leaving all your relatives behind? He said, never. Never. This country was worth it. And I started questioning all those values after 9/11 because I saw how our community was being treated, not just here, but obviously all over the world, where, you know, casually bombing a wedding is like no big deal. Oh, we just took out like 75 people. It's okay, it's a wedding party. Oops. Having said that, the lesson I took from that is that there was a shift, though. I mean, for the longest time, the war on terror was supported, just as vociferously from on the left and the right. I mean, like, it wasn't like we found any safe space in progressive circles either after 9/11, right? So, something happened with the election of President Trump. And I think that's when people realized, wait a minute, like, there has been like this crescendo of like hate and animus towards especially Muslims, but all kinds of minorities. And here it is, like in live action form, it is taking political. I mean, we've been feeling the political impacts for a long time, but suddenly the canaries in the coal mine, like America started paying attention, like, oh crap, like how did this happen? Well, it's been building up to that moment, till the Muslim ban. It's not like it came out of anywhere. And I really think that America is able to take stock of itself and to course correct, and to, not on all fronts, but for many things, like, to kind of recognize where it got things wrong, like the war on terror. Like, now we question, should we have been in Iraq? Should we have been in Afghanistan? What do we do? What have we done? Was Gitmo okay? What do we do? And I appreciate that. And that's the kind of thing, that's the lesson I try to tell young people, that it feels really disheartening in the moment when you're fighting a battle, but this country always has the potential to change. That's what I've realized in my adult life, at least.
Yeah, that's a really powerful way of looking at that. And I think you can apply it across the board, even in your work in innocence.
Sure.
I mean, it's a flawed system. We know that.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect
and look,
system.
10, 12 years ago, innocence was not a thing.
Right.
People were like, nobody falsely confesses. All forensic evidence is legit. Right? It just wasn't even a concept. Like, people, it's only in the last like decade or so it's really taken off, and people realize that the system can get it wrong over and over again.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, when I think about also the timing of your book and Adnan's freedom. I mean, I know this is your show.
No, please.
It was my freedom too, frankly, after 23 years. I was trying to get him out.
I can't believe how long. I mean, that's why, people are so interested in so many of the facets of your professional and personal life, but could you have ever imagined that this book was going to come out at that time? I mean, that's...
Absolutely not. Look, I mean, the book took 3 years to write, and it was supposed to be published like a year ago, not this past fall.
4 months today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're right. You actually remember the date. Yes, you're right. It is.
I love it.
And so when we started hearing rumblings that something might happen in Nan's case, I was like, wait, I have a book tour.
Sure. I
have a new podcast coming. I was like, this is really bad timing, Adnan, but fine, bring it. Yeah. And my dad was sick.
You've waited this long. I know.
Everything happened. Like, everything happened in the last 4 months. It's crazy.
It is really bizarre, and then we're so thankful because we reached out in the fall that this worked out.
Yeah.
That we were able to bring this all together. Timing is always something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because
I don't believe in coincidences.
Same. Yeah. Same.
And kind of to that, on that same idea, you can't force the type of work that you've done. We kind of talked about this, that you can take on 2 cases a year or something like that, realistically, unless you want to employ, a government department size workforce to dig through things. So how do you make a decision about where work takes you? I mean, you obviously have a major story that is what your kind of celebrity level work is built around, but I sense that you have a lot of things that you juggle and try to figure out how to follow the right wave, so to speak.
It's always a challenge, and like my career has kind of happened in 3 big chunks, and I'm 40. I'll be 49 this year, so I've been working forever. But the first 15 years or so was all related really to 9/11. It was post 9/11 immigration and civil rights work, because that was the call of the time. That's what my community needed. There weren't a lot of American Muslims in law school when 9/11 took place. A lot went into law school afterwards, but I was part of a small group that was able to understand the community, connect with it, be from it. And then that led directly to 6 years of work in national security policy, because I was like, why is my community being surveyed? What is happening on the policy level in DC, that national security policy that's filtering down to the imam at the local mosque being picked up by joint terrorism task forces, to be interrogated. And that led me into 6 years because I was like, I have to figure this out to find out like how does my community get out of this? How do we escape this trap? 6 years, and then Serial happened.
Right.
And when Serial happened, I was like, my choice is either stick with, and I was doing work that just fulfilled me. I worked with the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is an incredible organization, the New America Foundation, doing really international level policy work. And then Serial happened. I was like, well, Serial will end, and then people will say that was an amazing story, and then forget about Adnan. Like, I can lean into this and keep pushing on the momentum until he's out, or I just stick with my work. And I said, I don't have a choice. I gotta stop. And I wrapped up my national security work, and I said, we're leaning into innocence. I knew nothing about how to do innocence work. Teamed up with a couple of lawyers who also knew nothing, and we figured it out. And as we were unraveling Adnan's case, we just kept getting requests from other families and defendants and lawyers and innocence projects. I'm like, when an innocence project who's been doing it for decades is like, can you help us? I'm like, okay, that means we got something. And then it's like 25 cases later, I'm still doing that 7 years later. Yeah. And I think that's probably what will be the heart of my work for the rest of my life.
It also talks about, it's a little bit self-congratulatory here, but it talks about the power of the medium and audio,
100%.
Audio first work. Yeah. That is, in an era where short form is huge, TikTok and so on and so forth. Audio first, this sounds like a commercial, but it's true. I think that you can digest it in chunks, you can digest it on flights or car rides, and you can get the information to convince putting on your legal hat. Yeah. You can lay a case out very clearly.
I mean, and the intimacy of audio is something that you can't actually get from film and TV. Right. Because the way people connect to podcasters, literally, I'm just hanging out with my friends, literally they connect to the personality. They will follow that personality to the next project, the next project, the next case, and they will trust you, and they will meet you like they've known you forever. I know I feel like that because I'm a consumer of audio media, and I feel like that with people I listen to. I don't feel like that with people I watch on TV and film. There's some really intimate, and it creates real legitimate bonds, and it actually can drive people not just to trust you, but to take action based on that trust.
Well, I think it's you feel like you're listening in on someone's conversation, and you get to know them because there's the conversation about the specific situation you're talking about. Then there's all the other parts that come into a conversation naturally. Yeah. So it is a very intimate medium. I agree.
And it removes the kind of biases that might, without even unconscious biases that person might have if they saw you first. Right? They get to know you as a person. And I know there are people who listen to me on Serial, then on Undisclosed for years before they saw what I look like, and they're like, oh my God, we had no idea. Maybe if they saw what I look like before they listened to me, they might not want to listen to me,
Which, I started on radio and as a caller. And then, I was hosting shows, but I remember once being in the studio and somebody asked the host, what does she look like? And I remember thinking, and he gave a really ridiculous answer, but it was off-putting. And it was, I think for me, starting on radio, it was voice forward, and that was the connection. So it's a very interesting... I didn't know what you look like. I've never met you.
Yeah,
I thought I did, but I guess I didn't.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It forces people to focus on your ideas.
Yeah, it's like the voice.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
exactly. The ideas come across first. So thank you very much. That's all we need to hear today. The podcast and radio rule, and everything else is secondary. Thank you very much, all the big TV contracts. It is. Is it Women's History Month? I lose track of how it's framed.
Women's Day.
Right, exactly.
And some people are saying National Women's Day. I don't know. It's confusing.
Look at it through that lens, that convenient package. Look at it through just a general, ongoing 24/7, 365 rotation around the sun, big bangs happening. However you want to assess uplifting women, either on a condensed or on a day-to-day basis. What's your message to anybody out there who's hearing this right now that's still experiencing that type of bias because of their gender identity, and how to seize the moment if in terms of kind of a renewed focus that I think in general of people saying, hey, we need to seek equity in any way we can, but almost beyond that sort of forced way of thinking of things. What's your message to women, I guess? Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
No, to keep the question simple. To keep the question simple, what is your message to women?
I mean, I think what I would want to convey to women is that the challenges you're experiencing, they're not in your head. Mm-hmm. These are set up by, these are structures are deeply embedded in our society, culture, history to make things challenging for you. These are real fights. It's going to feel real personal, but these are real fights that are historic fights, they're global fights, and I don't think we're ever going to win a lot of these battles until we have a lot more women in leadership. So I really believe in women in leadership on corporate levels, in politics, in policy. Maybe that's when we will get some real structural change that actually can make our lives easier, you know what I mean, and give us some equity, if not exactly equality. So, it's not a great message. It's not like an uplifting message other than that, this is the fight that you can't escape and you have to fight it.
This episode was brought to you by the University of Rhode Island Online, who are offering a cannabis certificate program. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year, it can open doors for your career. If you're already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, the University of Rhode Island has that program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, their certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in 2 semesters. The next application deadline for the summer 2023 session is April 4th, and courses start on May 9th. Learn more at uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call, 401-874-5280.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.